Hi, good morning. Today we will be talking about trauma-informed care. My name is Elisa R.
And my name is Elizabeth Yepes. Thank you for giving us time to come in and share some information about trauma informed care with you all. We only have a short period of time with you guys, so we wrote our emails up on the whiteboard. So please feel free to send us any questions you guys might have or any concerns about any of the information we share with you all. We will be more than happy to share with you guys that information. Due to the short period of time, we might not have time for a lot of questions, so we wanted to make sure we share that with you guys. Okay, so thank you again for your time. So, like we said, today we're going to be talking about trauma informed. So, our objectives for today's presentation is learning about what trauma informed care is, how trauma relates to teaching and learning, how it's relevant to you all as teachers, and how trauma informed has evolved over the years. There's some relevant policies that we will be talking about, some recommendations of what you guys could do in the classrooms, and some look up and inform you guys more about, so you guys can learn more about trauma informed. Okay, so I'm going to share a quote with you all that I just want you guys to listen to it and kind of see what you guys think about it, and just keep this quote in mind through our presentation. So this is a quote: almost every student you meet may be fighting a battle you know nothing about. So stop, think, then make your response accordingly. And this quote is by Robert John. So this is a quote that I just want you to think through our presentation. Okay, we're going to start by sharing with you guys a quick video about trauma informed. So if you guys just
informed has so much to do with mindset, accepting that different people come into a school setting with incredibly varied life experiences. Some of those life experiences may be traumatic, and the way in which that plays out in my particular classroom could look a number of ways. And by me having that lens, it makes it less about are they doing the wrong thing and more about where is that behavior coming from, why is that happening.
Adverse childhood experiences like poverty, neglect, exposure to violence can bring about overwhelming stress, which can cause negative effects on the learning brain and on behavior. If children have the experience of adversity, they will have uneven development of these foundational skills like self-regulation and executive function or relationship skills. These are the children who are at risk to fall further and further behind. But the good news is that there is a powerful antidote to stress, and that is the effect of the human relationship and the presence of trust. Schools are an ideal place to produce many different kinds of relationships that are capable of buffering stress. Schools themselves can be healing places.
If you're fearful, if you're anxious, if you're distracted about something that's happened to you, you literally can't learn. Your brain shuts down. So it's essential to give kids social and emotional tools that allow students to recover from the challenges that they have experienced.
So what is trauma-informed care? It is a strength-based delivery approach that involves understanding, recognizing, and responding to the effects of all types of trauma. It also emphasizes on physical and psychological and emotional safety for both survivors and the providers. And it also helps the survivors rebuild a sense of control and empowerment.
So that's a quick definition for you guys.
So why are we presenting? So trauma-informed care is something that we are trying to implement in schools. So it has various different experiences can result in childhood trauma. So, and a child's response to these potentially traumatizing events will vary depending on the characteristics of the child. So for example, their age, the stage of development that they're in, their personality, and prior history of trauma. Also their environment, so school and family supports, And lastly, their experiences. So just depending on things that they've experienced in their life, maybe even relationship to family members. It's also important to know that children from all races and socioeconomic backgrounds can experience trauma. And research suggests that between half and 2/3 of all school-aged children experience trauma as they are exposed to one or more adverse childhood experiences that can be trauma-inducing. So how is it related to teaching and learning? So psychological changes to children's brains, as well as emotional and behavioral responses to trauma, have the potential to interfere with children's learning, school engagement, and their success in school. And then traumatic experiences can impact and limit brain development, resulting in diminished concentration, memory, and language abilities. So that would impact their performance at school, might cause them to have inappropriate behaviors and have difficulties forming relationship with classmates. Why is it relevant to teachers? So knowing the impacts of trauma can help teachers, staff members be able to recognize and understand the reasons underlying some of the behaviors that these children are experiencing with learning just different behaviors and then peer relationships.
So the history and the background about trauma-informed. So the concept of trauma-informed care has grown over the past 30 years. It all started after the Vietnam War, when there was more understanding of post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD. So this understanding on the trauma the veterans were experiencing allow for others to look at ways trauma affects others as well. So veterans' experience with trauma brought the light to the trauma families were experiencing, such as abuse, neglect, and other traumatic events. So now trauma-informed care is being applied in many different settings, such as mental health treatment settings, substance abuse treatment, child welfare systems, criminal justice institutions, and now we're seeing them more in school. Now we're hearing more about trauma-informed care, and although this might be new to us, the wording, this is something we're going to be seeing more of, and we are seeing more of.
So one of the policies that does implement trauma-informed care in schools is the policy of Every Student Succeeds Act, also known as ESSA. It was signed into law on December 10th, 2015. And it provides opportunity to increase access to comprehensive school, mental, and behavioral health services that are evidence based. And it also discusses training school personnel in trauma-informed practices and classroom management.
So when we're looking at data for Modesto City schools, we looked at the California Healthy Kids Survey. So we looked at the 2016, 2017, which is the most recent one. And then we looked at the 2014 and 2015 to compare some of the statistics. So what we found through our data research is that 38% of ninth graders reported experiencing chronic sadness and hopelessness, and then 22 considered suicide. And then 41% of 11th graders reported experiences of chronic sadness and hopelessness, and 21% considered suicide. So we compare those numbers to the 2014-2015 data. So we could see that there has been an increase. Although there hasn't been a huge increase, we can see that there are some trends. For example, ninth graders, there was a 6% higher amount of students experiencing chronic sadness and hopelessness. And then there was a 3% that considered suicide more. So we see this trend that it is increasing. Although in 11th graders, there wasn't a lot of change, there was still 1% change. So those are some of the trends that we are seeing, and that is some of the data we were able to collect in regards to some of the mental health data.
So evidence-based practice. So specific evidence-based strategies that can be used to support the learning needs of students in classrooms who have experienced trauma include discovering and building on the student's individual interest and competencies, being able to maintain predictable routines for children. So if it's, coming into class, having a seat, and then it's carpet time, also setting rules and expectations and being consistent with those rules and expectations, maintaining expectations for all students that are consistent with those of his peers or her peers, providing positive behavioral supports, using multiple forms of communicating information. So if it's verbal, if it's nonverbal, being able to write things down on the board while teachers are speaking, helping students identify and verbalize their feelings. And then the last one that is mentioned is identifying space where students can take a seat just to be able to calm down. If it's in the corner, like a comfy little spot. If it's, taking a step outside to get fresh air. So those are some of the evidence-based practices that we identified.
So as an educator, sometimes we ask ourselves, what can we do? Like, how can we see trauma-informed care in our classrooms? So one of the first things you could do is become familiar with signs of trauma. So we see that young children, 0 to 5, some of the signs they show are they're irritable, they're clinginess, dramatic play, school-age children, so that's 6 to 12. So sometimes they isolate themselves, they have attention problems, physical complaints, so maybe their stomach hurts all the time, they always want to be in the nurse's office, maybe they have headaches, regressed behaviors. And then in the youth, which is more of what you guys are seeing, so that's the 13 to 18, so emotionally numb, they are taking risky behaviors, sleep dysfunction, so maybe sleeping too much or not sleeping at all. So you might see some of this, like some of these students sleeping in your classroom, and sometimes they isolate themselves, so they academically they decline. So maybe they're your A students, and we're seeing some decrease in their grades, and so that's when you have to kind of start wondering. So these are some of the signs. So some of the things you could do, as Elisa shared, maintain usual routines. Give children choices, increase the level of support and encouragement, provide a safe place for the child to talk about what happened. So sometimes children spend more time at school than they do at home. So they trust you guys with a lot, right? So maybe just checking in and see how they're doing. So warn children if you will be doing something out of the ordinary, such as turning off the lights or making sudden loud noises, because this could be traumatic for them. Depending on what their traumatic experience was, this could be a trigger for them. So it's really important to keep that in mind. And then there's principles. So there's develop a sense of safety. So the student has to feel safe. So you could do that in your classroom. So be consistent and dependable. So trustworthiness and transparency. Facilitate peer support relationships and model positive adult peer relationships. So how you talk to them, even your body language could talk more about how your body language could say a lot, right? So that's important to model that. So collaboration and mutuality, work together for a solution. So let's say you can help them with something. So referring them to the counseling office, or usually mental health therapists, or some type of support for them. Empowerment, voice, and choice. Let them know that they have a choice and they have a voice. So sometimes they just need to learn this. And culturally, historically, and gender issues. So be aware of specific traumas that may impact certain groups, such as I mentioned, their gender, their culture, history that we might not be aware about. So all these things are very important for someone that has experienced trauma. Some of the resources we are going to share with you guys are on this page, and we could email them out because I know we have a short period of time. So responding to disclosure of personal trauma, be a trauma-informed care champion, child trauma toolkit for educators. This one's really good, so please take a look at it. Children violence and trauma interventions, the heart of learning, compassion, resiliency, and academic success, and integrating trauma-sensitive practices into the schools. So these are some resources that will give you a little more understanding of what trauma-informed care is. And like I said, we could email them out. On this page, you could see some of the references that we utilize to put our presentation together. So we will email that out to you guys as well, so you guys could have that as a resource. Does anybody have any questions today?